There you go.
There we go. Okay. Given we have a tight schedule tonight, so let's jump to it. So I'll call the Water and Sewer Board meeting to order. If we could, I'll say start with the roll call, Brenda, if we could.
Board Member Freeman. Board Member Jolie. Present. Board Member Kelly. Present. Board Member Mercier.
Present.
Board Member Ridley. Council Member Russell. Present. Mayor Sierra.
Present.
Vice Chair Boreski.
Present.
Chair Moore.
Present. And I believe we're losing the council members at about 5:45. Is that correct?
Somewhere around there.
Okay.
So
I just stopped.
I'm not sure if that pushed us to a quorum problem, but regardless, let's see what how much business we can get taken care of in those first 45 minutes. I apologize in advance if I try to push some conversations to determine whether or not they're critical for tonight or a future one. Let's go ahead and start with the minutes from the November 12th meeting. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Great. All right. Any edits, corrections, or changes? All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion carries. Brenda, do we have anyone from the public tonight for item 5?
We do not.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to 6, and staff, I'll invite you to reorder if needed. If there's anything you're worried about getting done tonight, feel free to move that up in the priority, but otherwise I'll turn it over for item 6 to you guys.
Thank you, Chair. This is Director Van Rye. So I think we can go in the order that we have.
Great.
Maybe I should apologize up front because I heard last month when I wasn't here, the meeting got done in like 20 minutes. So I'll try to go fast.
So can we do that again?
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Real fast.
Timer started. Okay, so this first item that we have is a resolution banning graywater use in systems in Englewood. And so some background on this is essentially the state passed a law that goes into effect in January, and it allows for graywater systems. So what we're bringing today is a local ordinance in Englewood that would maintain a local prohibition on graywater systems, and it complies with the opt-out framework that was adopted by the state, and it's really designed to help protect our public health, water quality, and city infrastructure, and we'll get to how it does that in a minute. So essentially background, so graywater is where wastewater from showers, tubs, sinks, laundry, things that aren't impacted by human waste are actually reused within the plumbing system of a house. So a lot of times what you'll see is like a shower will then be piped to a toilet tank, and then that toilet tank will reuse that water again to flush the water into the sewer system. That's when it discharges the sewer system. Other places you see graywater systems are like showers or laundry will be piped into some kind of an exterior irrigation system, something like that. Now, these are the things that aren't impacted by human waste. Human waste goes down the sewer and is something that even under this graywater system approach still continues to go straight to the sewer. So essentially, it was previously prohibited statewide unless certain municipalities opted in. This new law goes into effect in January of 26. And as an example, Arapahoe County has banned these systems by doing this opt-out essentially ban. And additionally, I think we found out that Boulder, Thornton, Arvada so also other municipalities that are looking at this as an approach to essentially prohibit these systems. And so why would we do that? So if we go to the next slide. So right now the idea of graywater is it's a future advancement in terms of reuse and sustainability and reusability for water systems. However, they're in their early stages of development from a technology and almost somewhat from a programmatic approach for municipalities and organizations at the local level. And when you look at what we have been contending with from a water system perspective, this adds an advanced regulatory programmatic exposure burden that we don't feel right now is the appropriate thing to add to our system of overhaul to the water utility. It may be something that we want to look at sometime down the road. From a sustainability perspective, it really does move into some of those longer term sustainability goals that are out there for water. However, right now, because there's a lot of code changes, there's building code changes, there's these requirements that we are not equipped to, one, have implemented by January 1 of this year, but two, we don't even quite know the unintended consequences of a program like this. And so we would like to propose that we follow suit with Arapahoe County and some of these other agencies to not say no forever, but to say no for now until we have time to put it in our normal priority schedule for this water utility to evaluate and take a really programmatic, holistic approach to how we would comply with a regulation like that and implement it across our city. So that is essentially what we're asking for today, is that prohibition, so that when the law goes into effect on January 1, we are, our city isn't stuck in a bind of now requiring this. And so I'll open it up for questions, Chair.
Floor is open. Anyone that has any questions?
I have a question. So I know it's in the packet, we don't use it here now. Is it possible there are any older properties in the city of Englewood that perhaps not the recycling within the house, but are using it to irrigate their yards?
I think it's very possible. You could actually, there's a couple of possibilities on this. I think you could get some people who are savvy in this type of technology that may have done some internal plumbing of their own to pipe their shower water outside and water their garden bed. If that were to occur, I would assume it didn't go through a building permit process because it's not right now an approved approach from a building permit process. But the idea that people aren't innovative with their own properties is, I think would be short-sighted on our part. Do we know about it being widely used? I think it's more of an exception and maybe a one-off if it even exists. Does that help answer the
Well, it does. And at this point, if it was older than when we were requiring inspections, would it be illegal to have that type of system?
I don't know if I think the state law addresses new properties moving forward in terms of how new buildings are built to incorporate this type of a requirement. I think with a lot of things that are historic and maybe even predated the utility or predated the incorporation of the city's utility, some of those things, I think have been allowed to persist because there's not a direct public health prohibition to them. But I'm stepping a little bit, I think, into Vicky's territory on this. So Deputy City Attorney McDermott.
Or, it's possible that there might be a property that was so constructed that it would have predated even the state law that is in effect now that prohibits the use of gray water. We would have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, but as Director Van Ryn pointed out, I don't know that we're aware of anything. So there is a possibility.
Okay. And as long as it's not a health risk, that's the biggest thing, correct?
Sure.
Okay.
I think one of the technologies you see this somewhat more internationally too, is you'll see a bathroom in a really small confined bathroom where the sink is the top of the toilet tank. And so you wash your hands in the sink and it immediately drains into the toilet tank, and then that's used And it's like one fixture, so it's a toilet/sink fixture all in combined. That's like the most combined use of gray water systems that I've seen, but I've only seen those internationally. I haven't really seen those domestically.
Mary, I have seen in mentions that people are doing to recycle, just for the purpose of recycling, though, using the water properly. But my question is that, so this time requirement on January 1st, where can you get some information to actually be able to see what is it that they're expecting to do? That's one concern that I like to learn about that one. Two, is that what is considered gray water? I mean, the organic compounds that is people are having, that's one factor. But then you're looking at inorganic stuff that is all the contamination that comes from different sources than human
Sure.
byproducts, and that is much more harmful. For instance, when you look at the washing detergents and all these items that are full of toxic stuff. So what I like to know is that here, this requirement that they're putting on the citizens, so what are the requirements they're putting in the manufacturers that they're producing all these compounds that is making, especially your job, very difficult to remove, and yet we comply to something that is organic, is degradable, and you can actually get rid of it. It's a normal process of cycle. I mean, you can make fertilizer out of these things and put it on the crops and actually be able to use the minerals and all of that. But that's not what the problem is. The problem is all these other compounds that are just really toxic. And then it's put in the consumer's hands, and then they will turn around and we're having a regulation that how we're going to control that. So
I think you've just, so I think your question is a much bigger question nationally, and it is outside the scope of what we're trying to cover here. It also illustrates the challenge that we have at South Platte Renew as it relates to treatment of everything that's allowed to come, and the most significant of which is of late is PFAS and PFAS compounds and things like that, which is why we're doing so much work both locally and nationally on the PFAS front. But again, that's outside of this. I think what the simplicity of this is basically by passing this, we keep everything status quo, and we don't require additional requirements on new builders or citizens. And then that gives us time over the next few years to figure out if we do want to do this kind of a program, what's the impact of water rights? What's the impact to consumptive use of those water rights? What's the impact to the things that you're bringing up? How do we know how we make sure that we don't get cross-contamination or backflow prevention or all these kinds of broader issues that often aren't considered when a state regulation passes. So that's where I think this keeps us in a place where we're status quo, protects our citizenry, but also leaves us the option that we can look at it in the future.
So can I please clarify? I guess what I'm asking, what can we do as citizens or the members of this committee that we can actually do a little bit of homework on that, so that therefore it doesn't come in the middle of the get close to it and then say, oh, you're stuck now. So we don't have options. I mean, what is the active role we can take that actually gives us some sort of a proactive movement that we can actually have something that we can actually present that we've been taking some sort of an active role in it, so that way we're not just stuck in a position. It's like, oh no, this regulation is forcing us to go to this space where the pure contamination is coming from another source.
So I think actually what you're capturing is so the most immediate action that the board can take based on our recommendation is to pass this prohibition. And then the bigger question of what can the board do, what can we as citizenry do, that's almost the piece that we want to evaluate over the next several years to see if there is, as we're looking at what does a program really look like, what are the impacts, that's when we can actually, somewhat focus in on where's the board's where's the board's assistance in that? Where's the council's assistance? Where's the community to help make sure that whatever program we ultimately decide or not to decide to adopt does meet the intent of these regulations.
So may I ask you another question? So this is a state law that is going to get effective.
Marjan, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you were here for the beginning. We're very tight schedule, and I do think it's beyond the immediate scope. So feel free to bring this up under members' choice, or we can the next meeting more than likely. I think for today, the question is simply, do we want to continue to prohibit this? As Peter said, stay status quo. So I'd like to go ahead and move us to a vote on this, given the timing. I don't mean to have to cut off the conversation. Can I get a motion for item 6A as written?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion before we vote? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Any opposed? All right, good. Motion carries. Peter, still your choice if you need to reprioritize, but
Yep, I think we'll keep rolling.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so this next one is, so as the board recalls, the Stormwater Enterprise Fund was reorganized under utilities, and so now we're bringing these items through the Water and Sewer Board for recommendation for approval for council. And so the next two items are actually very similar. They're amendments to IGAs that we have with Mile High Flood District. And essentially what these are is these are partnerships to help build funding for jointly funded projects to address stormwater systems within the city of Englewood. And so Mile High Flood District, from a background perspective, is a district that overlays essentially the Denver metro area, not just Denver, but communities surrounding Denver. And they derive their funding from mill levies that are on property taxes. And then what they do is they leverage that district-wide funding to partner with local agencies to actually fund bigger projects. So it's a way of taking our money and then expanding the impact of that money. So one of the ways we do this is we have these IGAs that are in place for specific drainage ways. The first one is Dry Gulch. And essentially what it does is it helps us identify the higher priority flood mitigation projects, put together funding over time to secure it so that we can actually ensure that the investment actually occurs in these drainage ways. And so if we go to the next slide, this is the funding history on this IGA. And you can see with the third amendment, with what we're proposing, we would contribute $375,000. There would be a match on Mile High Flood District's contribution of $375,000 for a total of $750,000. That adds to the previous years of $550,000, $750,000, $750,000 for a total ongoing bank of funding of $2.8 million that's held at Mile High Flood District. And when we get to a point where we have a project that matches up with the funding amount, that's when we would work with them to provide that joint funding. So this is their process to ensure that local entities are contributing an equal amount to these projects. So our recommendation on this one, and it will be very similar on the next one, is to recommend approving the ordinance for the Dry Gulch third amendment in the amount of $375,000, which is the city's share of that contribution, to continue to advance flood improvements in Dry Gulch.
Peter, would you go ahead and just get item 6C on the table too?
Yeah, so I can, let me do that quickly. So everything I just laid out for the Dry Gulch, also this one applies for the South Englewood Basin IGA, Fourth Amendment. And if you go to the table on this one, you can see the total aggregate amount thus far is, with the 400 contribution this year, would be $800,000 for a total of $5.45 million that's building for work in the South Englewood Basin. So we have two separate proposed motions, but essentially that's they're both they're separate items, but they're the same thing. just different.
Any
bases.
any clarifying questions for Pieter?
I do have a question. So this is coming out of the 2025 budget, correct?
That's correct.
And then who maintains this money? Does the city of Englewood, or does the money get paid to Mile High Flood District?
My understanding is we provide this to Mile High Flood District, and they hold it in some form of an escrow or an investment fund that actually then, when we ultimately have a project, they send it back to us to fund that project. And essentially what you end up having is, so let's say we had a $5 million project in South Englewood, if they contributed $5 million back, that essentially becomes a 50-50 funding split between Mile High Flood and the city of Englewood for work, for a hypothetical $5 million project in that South Englewood Basin.
Okay, and will we keep adding more amendments through the course of time? Have each of these been yearly?
That's my understanding is yes, they've been yearly. Is that correct? I'm looking to Director Rochelle, who.
Yep. Thank you, Councilman Russell, for the question. That's correct. They have been yearly contributions. At some point, the rough estimates of what the project could be will be reached. We do anticipate a potential request next year, and then depending on where Mile High Flood District's at, and if a consultant's been selected and a project's been selected, we would probably reevaluate at that time if additional contributions were necessary.
Okay, and I think I read in the packet that mostly it's about, is a lot of the water going to be conveyed over the top of the streets rather than enlarging pipes, or are they looking at doing both?
So I can answer that one. So the challenge with Englewood as it relates to stormwater is back in the 40s and the 50s when the city was developed, all the natural drainage ways were filled in. We built houses on them, and they put a small pipe to drain what was thought to be the normal amount of stormwater that flows in those drainage ways, because if you walked up to them, they looked dry, and it's like, how could there be a lot of water in this? Subsequently, we now have Mile High Flood District and FEMA floodplains and all those kinds of things, because the understanding of how drainage ways work, especially in the West, has gotten so much more advanced. And so to answer your question, part of the challenge is it was built the way it was built prior to any of these types of regulations back in the 40s and the 50s and even 30s and earlier. And so now what we're trying to do is we're trying to retrofit in the best solution that minimizes risk at a point where it doesn't become so unaffordable that we just can't do it. And that's the thing with stormwater. So stormwater is one of these things that everything that we do from a stormwater perspective is a risk-based decision. Because as I've said all along, there's, the thing with stormwater is there's always a bigger storm. And so we can build these things to optimize tolerated risk for the cost to reach that point of tolerated risk, recognizing that there is still always the risk that you sometimes see in the state. So I mean, take example the 2013 flood that was up in the Lyons area. That was a 500 to 1,000 year flood event. So we don't build systems for that because the reason is they're so infrequent. However, and they're so infrequent, plus they're really localized usually. And as a result, it's not a sound investment, because our bills would be so high that we're always balancing this. So to your question of, is it overtopping through the street or is it an underground system? It is the optimized system that makes the most sense from a risk versus cost holistic picture to say, this is what we think is the best solution. We recommend that solution. And then if the board or council says, you know what, we want to spend 10 times more because we want this much more protection, we would then come back and say, this is what that looks like on a customer's utility bill. And so those are the kinds of that's the challenge with stormwater, is it's always risk, and it's trying to minimize risk and optimize that risk versus cost thing so we don't financially break our customers.
And also at this time, we're not looking at removing houses, right? Because that would be acquiring property.
Right, which there's a huge cost to that. And so, that is an approach that communities have taken in the past. And so then it becomes a cost versus risk thing. And so if the goal is if you go into Aurora or Castle Rock or some of these places that are greenfield development, you'll see these large drainage ways. You'll see the way the streets are designed, the way the houses are perched up. It assumes that the 5-year storm and go underground into a storm sewer system, and the road is the conveyance system. But the way that the road is designed is it's basically designed as one big ditch, and the roads act as drainage outfalls as much as they act as roads. And in Englewood, we just didn't have that integrated approach to how houses were built or how roads were built. And so now we're working in trying to retrofit to the best ability. And so I think it all just goes back to risk.
Okay. All right, I appreciate that.
Sure.
All right, unless anyone requests otherwise, if there's an objection, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve items 6B and 6C as written.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of approving items 6B and C, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. On to 6D.
Okay, so this one I'm going to turn over to our water operations manager, Zach Alamasi, who is coming up. If you want to sit right there. So he will present this item, which is basically it's our annual process of ensuring that we have open purchase orders for bulk chemicals. Typically, we've done this not through this process because our amounts were under the approval levels, but with the increased cost of chemicals due to economy and tariffs, it's now to the point where we're running through this process, which is very similar to the process we set up over at South Platte Renew several years ago to make sure that the approval bodies approve these prior to us, making aggregate purchases on it. So with that background, I'm going to turn this over to Zach to talk about bulk chemicals.
Thank you, Peter. So aluminum sulfate is our primary coagulant. So this is really the first chemical that, for the most part, we introduced into our treatment process. The intent of aluminum sulfate is to basically combine with any impurities in the water, whether that's particulates, organics, algae, and once it combines with it, it starts to form what we call in the treatment process is flock, which is basically a mix of the chemical and the impurity. It becomes basically at that point insoluble as it goes through the process and combined with other particulates that have combined with the chemical, it grows in size and in weight, and that helps it to settle out of the water. So that's really kind of the initial process. It's a very critical process because beyond that, then it's filtration, and that's really for the finer impurities in the water. So what we discovered this year, talking to Chemtrade, our vendor, is they were significantly impacted by the tariffs, mostly the ones that target aluminum and steel. Basically, aluminum sulfate is derived at some point from some kind of an aluminum ore. So they mine it, and then through chemical processes, they turn it into aluminum sulfate for water and wastewater treatment facilities. So the impact, in Chemtrade, again, they supply most of the utilities on the Front Range. They have a treatment facility here, or a manufacturing facility here in Denver. So they basically tried to absorb as much as possible of the cost, but it got to a point where it was beyond their control. So unfortunately, they're passing it on to their customers. And it's in the order of about 75% increase in the product. We also get liquid ammonium sulfate. That's a chemical that we add in the disinfection process to stabilize our chlorine disinfection throughout the distribution system. Once it combines with chlorine, it becomes a much more stable product, and it lasts a lot longer in the distribution system for the safety of our drinking water for our customers. So with the increase in aluminum sulfate, again, that's an increased cost by almost 75% for aluminum sulfate, for a total amount of $316,000 for the year 2026, and added to it $56,000 in liquid ammonium sulfate. Again, we get a product from Chemtrade as well for a total amount of $372,000.
Wow. Floor's open for questions.
Well, I have questions, if it's okay, and if it's long, I can ask Pieter later on as yourself. These are private companies, right? The Chemtrade.
Correct.
So, and I understand that the aluminum production is byproducts of steel and corporations, so it's not even coming from out of the country. So I don't even understand why there's such a 75% increase based on this. Is really, I personally like to do a little research on that because it doesn't make sense to me. Why this is a product that they want to get rid of. That's one of the reasons. It's a toxic byproducts that they put in the environment, so that way they can get rid of it. So then they turn around and charge us for it, and now they have a great reason based on turf that now they're going to charge us another 75% above that. So my question is, can we avoid this company?
So I can answer that. So
and I'm asking the question fast, so that way I
no, this is good. So again, we get to more of a macroeconomic question that really is outside the scope of what we need. So these are the suppliers of these chemicals locally. They're under MAPO, which is our cooperative purchasing agreement, and so we are somewhat just at the mercy of what their pricing is, because these are critical chemicals to water treatment. Where they source their aluminum and how that all works is frankly, beyond what we can necessarily have influence over, because we just have to go to who has these chemicals, and these are the best pricing because of those MAPO contracts.
So what you're saying, that there is no competitor?
Well, they're competitively bid as a cooperative. Well, not just us, but also other cities. MAPO is a municipal cooperative purchasing agreement. Even though
Isn't it state level?
It's a state level. It's a state level process, and so we participate.
There we go.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Colorado's Municipal Assembly of Procurement Officials.
Yes. And so we use that process to buy a number of our bulk chemical processes. And the same thing over at South Platte Renew, we do the same thing, although there are some of them that don't fall into the MAPO category because they're so specific. But that's how we make sure that it's competitively bid. And when we aggregate as water providers together, that as opposed to us individually trying to negotiate with these chemical companies, we actually get the best pricing because we're negotiating as a conglomerate of water providers. And so that's typically how we approach these. And if they have pricing changes that they need to pass on to us because of tariffs or whatever sourcing issues, that's why we're here. And so there might be a broader question that you have in terms of, is this really, is there, that digs into all of that? But on January 1, we need these chemicals to treat water. And this is what it's going to cost us. And so that's why we open up these at the beginning of the year. We're not spending $316,000 on January 1. We do this because this is one of those aggregate purchases that over time, our first set of purchases, we get this monthly or probably every 2-week deliveries on these. And so the first delivery might be a few $1,000s, and you add more thousands and you add more thousands. What happens is we project what do we think the total aggregate amount is for the year, and when it exceeds our purchasing levels, which are $250,000 because it's pre-budgeted, that's where we come to the approving bodies like the board and council to get that pre-authorization, because we know we're gonna exceed that 250. And that's why we bring these this way. Otherwise, what happens is they're small purchases that aggregate, and then at the end of the year, we've spent $300,000, and the question is, well, how come that's a $300,000 purchase with one contract? How come you didn't come get approval? So this was a system we put in place, like I said, over at South Platte Renew probably 5 years ago, to address this exact issue of aggregate purchasing of chemicals.
Peter,
Yes.
quick question. Big fan of co-ops when goods are involved. I think it does save us money, time and effort. But my question is, what's the term on this agreement? When will it go out to bid again with the state, I'm assuming?
My understanding is it's every couple
Yeah,
years.
I think it's every
Okay.
3 years.
Every 3
Yeah,
years.
and I believe and I don't quote me on this, I'm not sure. I have to get with Trudy on it.
Okay.
But
it's coming up,
mhm.
I would assume. Okay. So then that would ensure that we're getting the best
Yep.
market rate out there. So,
Yep.
yeah. Okay.
And then the other thing too is there's not a lot of chemical providers that provide these chemicals in
Right.
bulk. And the other thing is sometimes we're in an emergency situation that we need chemicals, and we've had situations where we stick with a provider because we know they're reliable, and other providers may have, provided a cut cost, but the reliability has been questionable to the point where we've run into problems with securing chemicals during emergency, or during what could result in emergency. So we don't just look at cost on these things, we look at cost and reliability of service, since they're so critical to the water system. And at the same time, we utilize the cooperative contracting to make sure we get the best pricing.
And if I may add, this particular chemical is used in such large volumes. I mean, the Allen Water Treatment Plant uses, SPR uses it. Most, if not all of the Front Range uses it. So that's what really, and it used to be General Chemical, Chemtrade acquired them years ago, but they built a dedicated facility in Denver just for the purpose of supplying the Front Range. They also secure their distribution, the tanker trucks. So, because it's supplied in such large volumes, small competitors or other competitors have to have the infrastructure Chemtrade has to be even competitive. So it's not a chemical that, for example, if it's coming out of Utah or coming out of California, that a smaller company can provide when there is 50 to 100 deliveries, for example, a day to the entire Front Range. I mean, Denver Water uses it, Aurora uses it, like I said, most, if not all of the utilities. So there is kind of an infrastructure built behind these contracts to supply a large number of utilities at a time. Otherwise, it's not going to be worth it for, another competitors, if you will.
So Chair,
I was going to suggest we get a motion for item 6D. Unless you want, Peter, do you have something else?
No, I was just looking at the clock.
Yep. Can I get a motion to approve item 6D as written? All right, a second?
Second.
All right, further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. Item 6E.
Thank you, Zach, appreciate it. So up next is an annual renewal. We've done this for the past several years, and so this is our annual renewal on the Water Rights Engineering and Water Rights Legal Counsel. And here to present this today is Stephanie Ellis from our engineering department. So Stephanie, take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is going to be for our water resources contracts. That is with Martin & Wood and Berg Hill. We've used them for a number of years and presented on this the past few years. So Martin & Wood and Berg Hill are critical in protecting our Englewood's, our source water and our water rights, which is very critical to the city. In addition, they help us with drafting and reviewing agreements between Englewood and other agencies. They help us with utilizing our water rights, such as water exchanges, water court proceedings, and water supply planning. Martin Wood and Berg Hill's primary job is protecting our valuable water rights. Englewood has very senior water rights that date back to the 1800s. And as you're probably aware, water is a very limited resource in Colorado, and it can be very competitive when it comes to water resources. Martin Wood have continued to help us protect our valuable water resource portfolio. In addition, they help us optimize that portfolio and also help with supply and demand planning. We've been working with Martin Wood for a lot of years, and we've been very happy with them. They continue to do good work for us. They have the expertise and knowledge and capacity to do this work that we don't have in-house, and we'd like to continue working with them. In addition, they have a lot of history and background with the city that helps with water court cases and also day-to-day work that we do with them. And as issues arise or when they do, Martin Wood and Berg Hill are good about letting us know about that, and then we work through that with them. Our Plan 2026 work is very similar to 2025. It includes strategic planning, demand analysis, capital planning, yield optimization, water quality, water court applications and diligence, and litigation activities. These are our proposed contract renewals for 2026. For Berg Hill, we're recommending a contract renewal in the amount of $600,000, and for Martin & Wood, we're recommending a renewal in the amount of $406,000. As you'll notice, these contract amounts are actually less than our 2025 contracts. That's because in 2025, we anticipated more water court cases going to trial than we're anticipating for 2026. And while there are still a couple that may occur in 2026, they also may settle before they go to trial. These contract amounts are already included in our 2026 budget as well. Questions?
All right, floor is open. Great. Then I'm going to ask for a motion for item 6E as written.
I move the motion.
Marjan moved.
Okay.
I'll second.
Great. Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll just add my take. I think these are the same firms that have been helping us my entire time that I've been involved with the water board. I think, our attorneys, their main game is actually playing defense, as even we saw with that, the litigation case that we may talk about here in a minute, and that it's so key. Their ability to know our rights and watch out for us in all these proceedings is critical to their, to what we need in protecting our asset. So, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, sorry about that. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Let me do this. We have no old business. The next item is just an informational. I believe that we will, if council members need to step out, I believe we still have a quorum, so I think we can still continue with that. But if you guys need to go, we're still good. So feel free to excuse yourself when you need to. And with that, I think we'll move on to item 8A. Just a little review of the settlement, the Rangeview water case that we all had to deal with on a fire drill basis a couple weeks ago, week or two ago.
Chair, I'll kick this off. So first off, I'd like to thank the board for the rapid response to this. This is not how we typically like to do business. However, there are certain circumstances where we do have to respond quickly because we are coordinated. This settlement was being coordinated with a number of other opposers, and it came out of the court case and the judgment in the court case. And so the timing of our normal process didn't fit with the timing of the needs of the court. And so that's why you saw this happen this way. So that said, this is really good news. With the court ruled largely in the favor of the opposers, and we've got a number of our concerns addressed through the results of that court case. And we also are receiving almost $80,000, $79,000 and some change to cover our court costs. So the costs that Stephanie just talked about that were Berg Hill related court costs, Berg Hill and Martin and Wood. For this court case, we're getting $79,000 of those costs reimbursed back to us because we spent the money. And so that was part of the settlement. And so overall, it was there's more technical aspects of the details of what was in there from why it was an issue for us, is really about the timing of what's called depletions and when the water gets back to the river. And if the water gets back to the river at the wrong time, it could cause what's called a rebound call. And a rebound call is a call farther downstream on the river that calls our rights out of priority. And so that's the kind of thing that if going back to the last item, that Berg Hill and Martin and Wood are constantly paying attention to, that we have to look all the way down the lower South Platte to make sure that things that don't even look like they might be related could potentially have a future impact to the availability of our water rights because of the way, in this case, their engineer proposed the timing and amounts of the water that was owed back to the river as part of their project. Quick summary. So that's kind of it from a technical perspective and a judgment perspective. I'm going to also turn it over to Deputy City Attorney McDermott to fill in the gaps and correct anything I said that was wrong.
No, I mean, everything you said is completely on point so far. Essentially, by approving the settlement, what we were able to do is to impact the augmentation timeline. So essentially what we're doing is that Grandview gets a scaled back project with more strict conditions, thereby protecting Englewood's rights on the South Platte, and then we also get our costs paid as a result of what's been negotiated. So again, yes, so it's good news. We are happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, and again, thank you to the board for responding so quickly on this one, because it was a good outcome for us. So I think that's it, Chair.
Yeah, and board members, again, I just wanted to make sure we touch base on this just because we did, certainly did not have time to fully dive in as a board. Sometimes that stuff happens, but if there was want to make sure if anyone had any concerns or whatever that we could address them here, but that's the main goal. Any comments or questions, or we can move on? All right. Peter, anything more from staff?
I think you just see some of the look ahead of the schedule of what we've got coming up in the new year. And other than that, I think we're good from a staff perspective.
Board members' choice. Does anyone have something they'd like to raise tonight? Sounds like we're good. Well, with that, I wish everyone a happy holiday and adjourn the meeting. Thank you for the speed tonight. I appreciate it. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Almost kept it in that 20-minute-ish.